the time is going to pass whether we take action or not. So if I know I'm going to be 5 years older in 5 years, I might as well put in the appropriate amount of energy and the appropriate actions on a daily basis for those 5 years, because that'll put me way ahead.
Welcome to Mindset Lessons from the Field. I'm Gina Kazaza, the author of the upcoming memoir, Training with a SEAL. Today's guest, you might remember from episode 13. He was a Green Beret. Today, he has his own coaching company, Top Tier Performance. If you're still wondering who our guest is, this will definitely give it away if the name on the title didn't give it away for you. He used to be a Frisbee instructor. Yeah. We have a fan favorite, Chris Lee, back on the show, but this time he's back as a published author. His book, Beyond the Battlefield, was just released. I read it, and I had to invite him back to do a deep dive into the book because it's absolutely perfect for anyone who wants to be the best version of themselves and push themselves beyond the limits that we and society put on ourselves. So, of course, this is the perfect platform for it. So I'm really excited to speak with Chris Lee. Chris, thanks again for coming for round two.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me back. Our first conversation was tons of fun, so I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm glad. I really enjoyed it. And the fact that you're back for round two makes me happy because speaking with you the first time, I feel like we just touched the surface. You said a lot of amazing things the first time that I really want to bring back and deep dive, because the first time you guys give such great advice, but I feel like that 1 hour time, it's just not enough to really dive into these lessons that have now shaped you and have created not just the person that you are, but the life that you have around you and the career that you build for yourself, especially, someone like you. And we're going to talk about this. You talk a lot about identity. I'm kind of just jumping right into it because you went through several and we go through several. We don't realize it. Someone like yourself, it's like being in special ops is a huge identity and it's a huge chunk of your life. But we also forget about those moments like being a child and is that part and a teenager and a college student and then whatever that career is. And if we switch careers and then we become a parent or a spouse and all this other stuff creates these identities. And you talk a lot about identities in the book. And I really want you to explain what that is. And then I'd like to break some of that down.
Yeah, absolutely. I think setting goals is super important, but I have found that the goals almost become antagonistic as we live, because it's like this thing that we haven't achieved yet. And so I'm like kind of a failure until I achieve that thing. I would argue it's a large reason why like New Year's resolutions don't really materialize after like week 3, because it's like you're constantly fighting against this thing that you just can't quite get there yet until eventually maybe you do achieve it. The reason I focus pretty heavily on identity, not only in the book, but in my coaching practice, is because as you define the kind of individual you want to become, all the goals kind of sort themselves out. As opposed to saying, I want to lose 30 pounds this year, shift the mindset to I am a healthy person. I am an active and physically fit person. Well, what does an active and physically fit person do? Well, they work out and they train their body. And then the weight just kind of is a side effect of that identity shift, as opposed to viewing yourself as like, well, I've never been able to stick to a diet or I've never been able to stick to a workout plan so far. Ignore all that. Say, all right, what kind of person do I want to be? And now let me try to behave like that identity that I've realigned myself to. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I really like that perspective. How would someone come up with an identity? Like, would you say create the goal first and then create the identity, create the identity? Like, how does one come up with one?
I found that creating identity first helps a great deal, because the identity is like the foundation on which you stack all of your goals. And something I tell a lot of my clients is the identity ideally is kind of set in stone. And the goals can shift according to, opportunities that present themselves or maybe have maybe those doors have closed and you have to shift your goals. The identity stays the same. The goals can shift around it. How do I go about teaching somebody to create an identity? This is the exercise I have them go through. As you know from the book, I break life down into 5 different categories. So mental, physical, emotional, social, and financial. Each of those could have subcategories to it, but I think those are the heavy hitters. And so I tell my clients, hey, picture yourself 5 years from now and absolutely everything is perfect. Everything is exactly the way you want it. The relationships you have with your loved ones, your financial success or your bank account, your ability to be emotionally intelligent, your physical fitness level, everything is perfect. Now, as you envision that, and sometimes that is difficult for people, particularly if they've developed patterns that are less than excellent leading up till today. But I really encourage them to put on their like imagination cap and say, all right, imagine everything is perfect. Now, based on that vision, create present tense I am statements around those various categories. In the last episode, we talked about my physical identity, which is look good naked, be hard to kill. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's what I am right now. It's something that I'm striving to be. And so what does somebody that is physically fit and capable, what do they do on a daily basis? It helps me backwards plan. And you can do that with any of the categories, like the mental category. A lot of people talk about mental resilience. I tell them to create identity statements in the present tense, specifically so they can say them out loud to themselves over and over again. But like for mental, it's like I'm mentally resilient, or I am a constant learner. That's mine. It's like I want to seek out new information, new skill sets to help me become a jack of all trades.
I think what's really interesting too, I like how it's, you don't have to be that yet. It's like,
Right.
this is what I'm striving to be, which is really
Exactly.
important,
Right.
because that's what, keeps you going and also doesn't make you, or for myself anyway, when you think about how hard it might be to get there or all this other stuff, whereas like, no, it's just something that I'm striving to do. And every single day I'm getting there and I'm getting better and I'm moving forward in that direction. I think that's so important to understand and take on. And I
Right.
also like that there are different aspects for different people. For you, it's I'm a constant learner of life. And I think that's really interesting because it allows you to be open-minded. We have a guest coming on the show, Randy Weitenheimer, who trains special forces. And one of the things we talk about is mindset. And he talks about how it's an open or closed set. And if it's an open set, well, then you're open to everything. You can have conversations with people and all that stuff. Whereas you can also understand, like, if you're vegging out on the couch and you have that physical identity happening, you're like, it gets you to get up and move. It gets you more to go after who you want to be and strive to be versus I'm going to go to the gym today and then you just never go. I like that. And I like how you come to that conclusion. Now, can that just like I know goals you said can change around that identity,
Mhm.
can the identity at all change? Like, what if someone's like, well, that sounds really good, I'm a constant learner, but also the other one sounds really good, or this, I don't know which one to pick, and then you don't
Sure.
pick.
Yeah, right, right. I'm always a little bit flexible with kind of my coaching plan. But I would say the identity should be almost vague enough where it can encapsulate all the goals that may be associated with that. So like for mine, for example, like I am a constant learner, that's relatively vague. Like what does that mean? Is like, am I learning about philosophy, or is it like workout routines, or is it, how to fix my car? Like I haven't narrowed that down, but that's on purpose to allow for kind of like a broad scope of particular goals that may be associated with that. So for example, I look good naked, I'm hard to kill. That's something I'm striving to be. Early on, one of my goals was like, I'll be a bodybuilder. Like who doesn't want to be yoked, right? As I was kind of progressing through that, I realized like it kind of wasn't in alignment with what I wanted to become. And what I really want to become goal wise is just a well-rounded athlete. The ability to do, cardio and the ability to, have decent mobility, but also be strong. So like I was able to shift my goal to better align with what my identity is that I'm striving for. And who knows, maybe in, 5 or 10 years, that goal may shift again. Maybe I'll I want to be a professional frisbee player. Like you never know. The identity, I would say, have it pretty firm. Maybe not quite carved in stone, but pretty close.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. I guess for myself, I'm just like, is that the best one for me? But then again, at the same time, having it so vague, it allows you to explore and see where you're going. Because another thing is, I didn't expect to move this quickly in terms of shifting throughout the book, but we may end up doing that where it's just, I'm just going to move because you mentioned in the book the saying, Jack of all trades, master of none. And you said in there that we often forget the second part to that. And it's very true because the second part is often more better than one or something like that.
Yeah, so it's
Yeah.
jack of all trades, master of none is often better than a master of one. And the thought behind that is like being specialized in a skill set is super important if you're like a doctor or something like that, or even professional baseball player. Like sometimes you have to be specialized, but then you're limited in kind of like what you're able to do because you've spent so much time and energy specializing so specifically. Whereas in my opinion, like on the teams, everybody has to be a jack of all trades. They have to be kind of good at everything because we need to have the capability to, go to the range, shoot a bunch of rounds and then potentially put on a suit, go talk to a diplomat. And that is like a broad scope of practice when it comes to, because like on the range, it's like it's a bunch of dudes hanging out and the filter's pretty loose out there. Being able to kind of switch gears and then go like be super professional or whatever the case may be, in my opinion, it makes you a little bit more well-rounded.
So when did you start developing your identities? Like when did you start developing like this from your book?
That's an excellent question. I think kind of early on, prior to the military, I knew generally what I wanted out of life, and it focused a lot on the physical fitness aspect because I was like, I want to be able to perform at kind of top levels within the military. I don't think I actually crystallized the concept of identity and then particularly breaking it down in various categories until probably within 6 months or a year of me getting out of the army. That's when I was planning on becoming a coach, and it's like, well, what is it that I have to offer? Like what perspective can I show people that will benefit them? Kind of looking back on my career and then the time leading up to it, I was like, actually, I think behaving like the person I wanted to become is a key aspect of success, particularly in the long term. And like, all right, now how do I articulate that well? And it kind of shaped into this identity statement, and then which then fleshed out further into like the various categories.
So was it easier for you then as you were transitioning out of the military to establish these identities for yourself versus the one identity that you had?
I think so. I've always kind of been big on goal setting. I think planning out your future and being proactive on how it turns out is much better than being reactive. That component has always been there. The identity piece, particularly as I was transitioning out, that's like a major life circumstance is when you go from, military to now veteran status, where you're interacting with people that think very differently than you a lot of the time. Again, I kind of knew what I wanted to do at that point, and I essentially coached myself. I sat down and was like, all right, who do I want to be? What do I want to achieve? And what are the steps that I need to take in order to get there?
So then why should someone who is specialized, who's not like for me, this totally speaks to me because I am the jack of all trades. I do so much and I'm always constantly taking more on. So like why should someone like a doctor who might be listening to this or a nurse or someone that's in like or baseball player, someone that's in one profession take on this identity exercise?
I think primarily because even if you are specialized in something, let's say doctor, there are still a great number of aspects of life that need to be addressed. Something I tell a lot of my clients is like, I'm not a big fan of balance. I think it's not a great term to use for life. I much prefer the term harmony. And what I mean by that is in an orchestra, different instruments are going to have different amounts of playing time, but that doesn't mean each instrument is, or one instrument is less important than the other. But rather, it's like if they play the right notes at the right time, it's going to sound amazing. Versus like life balance, it's like everything gets equal time and energy. I just don't think that's very realistic, particularly if you're somebody that's specialized. Like a great deal of time actually gets monopolized by that specialty. Again, whether you're a doctor or whatever. If that's the case, if you understand that a majority of your day and energy is going to be kind of monopolized by a profession or whatever, the time that you then spend in the other areas of life, whether it's relationships or emotional intelligence or financial security, those areas might not get the same amount of time, but the time that you do spend in those areas should be significant and not taken for granted, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's as you're saying this, it comes right through. There's a story. I think I'm butchering it if anyone knows the story. Believe it was this girl, she worked at McDonald's or something like that, and she worked like crazy, and she'd like
Yeah.
get off at a really, really late time. She had like a pass at 24/7 fitness or something, and she would go to the gym. And no matter how exhausted she was, no matter what, like she always took herself there. Her story got released because she just posted a video or something like that of her in shape and stuff, and it went crazy because there was no excuses. And I feel like when you have an identity for yourself, you don't have time for the tired. You don't have time for the
Exactly.
excuses. It's
Right.
like I'm tired today, but I don't have time for that, and I keep going. Like that's something that Randy taught me, where he was just like, yeah, you could be tired and you just acknowledge it, but be like, I don't have time for that. And you get the energy to just keep on moving on, because again, you want to be this person that you're identifying as and that you're striving to be. Well, that person doesn't get created by sitting on the couch, right?
Right.
And the things that happen around you, like you mentioned, like financially and physically and all this stuff, like you're going to see the growth happen
Mhm.
as you continue to move forward in life. But it's not going to happen when you, as you mentioned in the book, you talked about being a microwavable society.
Right.
And that is so relatable. And I just want you to talk about the microwavable society.
Yeah, I can't dog on social media too much because that's that's like
We're
that's
on
where my yeah, that's what we're on
it.
it. Like that's where my business has kind of started. But I would say that a lot of social media is designed to like grab your attention and just hold on to it, which then means the content that is created is often like micro bursts of interest or showcasing only the wave tops of somebody's life, to include like the Lamborghinis or the trips to Dubai or whatever. I think it's creating this almost assumption that I should have that like right now because they have it right now, you know?
Oh my God, that is my language. That is it. No, that's it. I mean, I'm not the only person that thinks that. I mean, you just
Right.
said it. Like,
Yeah.
you look at it and you're like, that should be me. Like,
Right.
or like,
Right. Yeah.
it's like, or like, well, and the reason why I say it is because like I work so hard, right?
Right.
And the thing is like I work so hard as like in podcast, let's just go with podcasting in general, right? I'm
Right.
cutting clips, I'm editing the videos. I mean, I'm doing the whole entire thing, right? And then I'm seeing like these big shows, like just throwing the Sean Ryan show out there, right? And he's been
Right.
at it for 4 years and has massive success, right? And
Yeah.
you look at that, and because you model off of somebody, right? So I model, that's one of the shows I model off of, but you have to like ground yourself to be like, I'm getting there. Like I'm
Right.
striving, but at the same time, I see it and I'm just like, my God, 1 million views for that clip, and this one got 100. I don't understand. We have the same people. I don't, and then
Right. Yeah.
yeah. So you're speaking my language. Yeah.
Well, and I'm speaking primarily to myself. I understand that the things that are worthwhile, it's like a slow burn. Like you can't flashbang stuff and expect like significant or long-lasting results. But if you can slow burn it and then build that fire and that heat, that's where like that momentum really, I think, kicks in. And kind of thinking of like my journey through the Q course, it was 3 years long. And so I couldn't become a Green Beret in 90 days. I had to show up for, for a long time and show up consistently. And that doesn't mean I was perfect every day, but it meant that I tried to outnumber the bad days of poor performance with a lot of good days with excellent performance. If we as a society and just individuals in general can shift from like, all right, I'm in this for the long haul because the time is going to pass whether we take action or not. So if I know I'm going to be 5 years older in 5 years, I might as well put in the appropriate amount of energy and the appropriate actions on a daily basis for those 5 years, because that'll put me way ahead compared to like if I didn't, and if I just like assumed that I should have XYZ in 90 days.
So what do you do for yourself, like when you maybe comparing or feeling down because you're not where you think you're supposed to be, right? I was listening, I think it was like Simon Sinek, and he mentioned like going to the gym, you don't see the results right away, right? But you
Right.
have to stay consistent and show up, and then you're gonna like see the results over time. But the hard part is showing up when you're not seeing the results or getting the results. And and how do you let go of that essentially it comes down to expectations, right? And we
Right.
all have them. So
Right.
how do you just get rid of them?
I think part of it is particularly when I find myself comparing, as soon as I notice that thought of like, why don't I have what they have, whatever area of life that may refer to, I I immediately catch that negativity and throw it away and say, I'm so excited for them. I'm so excited for their success because they're doing great things, and that then shifts my perspective to like one of gratitude, which then gets me excited about my own journey, because then now I can like with clear eyes see like at some point I can get there too. It may take longer than I want, but because I'm excited about them, I know it's possible, which means I can help maintain my level of patience, which isn't always easy.
I like that you said, I know it's possible,
Yeah,
and it comes down to that 4 minute mile, right? One person did it, and then, more and more
exactly.
people did it.
Exactly.
Um, and as you're talking, it's reminding me of what you said the first time we had you on the show, and you also you dive deeper into it in the book, but we touched upon it on the podcast. You mentioned motivation is fickle.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, as we're talking about this, it's reminding me of that. And can you explain what exactly that means?
Yeah. I kind of look at motivation as icing on the cake. And what I mean by that is if you were relying completely on motivation to, let's say, go to the gym, that means you're making all of your decisions based on emotion. How do I feel today? Like, am I in the mood to go to the gym? Well, that approach isn't going to get the results that you actually want. And so rather, like the example you just gave, the gal that went to Planet Fitness every day after work, no matter what, that is like an identity that she adopted. She's like, no, I am someone who goes to the gym daily. If you can if you can do that every day regardless, then when the motivation does show up, and side note, it often shows up after action has already taken place. When that motivation does show up, it's just like fuel to the fire. And now I'm really going to the gym and excited about it. And I've busted through this plateau of like, I'm frustrated. I don't feel like it, but I've stayed consistent. Don't want to break that streak or whatever the case is. But yeah, like I'm a firm believer that if you solely rely on motivation to do anything, you're going to get less than excellent results, because again, it is emotion based, and emotions vary depending on how well you slept, what you ate, if your boyfriend or girlfriend just broke up with you. Like there's a whole multitude of things that affect emotion. But if you just make a decision like, no, I'm going to choose to do this consistently, the motivation kind of doesn't matter.
I really like that because, well, we're human beings and we're emotional people. I mean, like that's
Facts.
just what it is. And
Right.
as a woman, we're way more emotional than you guys. So, so it's just like it's hard sometimes to and not allow our emotions to dictate our actions, right? Because
Right.
they're just such a, I mean, it's an identity within itself.
Right.
And you have to learn how to control those emotions. You had a whole chapter in the book dedicated to being the calmest person in the room. I used to be a reactor. I mean, that was my thing. Like, I grew up in an Italian family. The whole family is reactive. Okay. So,
Yeah.
I've learned over time to be more calm, and my family would be like, she's not calm. But I'm way more calm than the person that I was. And again, I'm striving to continue to be calmer and
Right.
not a reactor. So can you talk about, I think this is, to me, like, I loved all your chapters in the book. However, I felt like this one, there's another chapter I'm going to get to, was really, really like, the cool thing about your book, and I'm kind of segueing, is that like you don't have to go in this linear
Right.
direction of reading your book, right? You
Right.
could go into the chapters and you could just be like, okay, like I'm a reactor, like this chapter speaks to me, and you could just focus on that chapter. Like your book isn't a book to be read, it's a book to be digested and to
Sure.
experience. And I love experience books, and you have these exercises throughout your book to get us, the reader, involved. I mean, it's
Yeah.
like a personal Chris coach, like
Yeah.
through the book. And
Yeah.
I love it. And I really want to talk about this chapter because I feel like, especially today, where we can't, as a society, seem to have an intelligent conversation in terms of religion, politics, education, like anything like that. We just react, right?
Right.
So let's talk about this chapter because I feel like it's relevant for today.
I agree. It was actually one of my favorite chapters to write too, because remaining calm, particularly in chaotic situations, almost becomes a superpower. Having the ability to think clearly and think about what the next step is in whatever situation you're dealing with, you're just going to be able to help more people than if you were panicking and becoming overwhelmed or frightened or angry or whatever. So yeah, being calm is like super important to me. I want to be very clear. Like I don't mean suppress and ignore emotions, but rather like be able to experience all of your emotions, but don't let them dictate what your next step is. There's a great book out there by Michael Singer called The Untethered Soul. And he talks about our interaction with emotion. He helps you kind of develop this practice of creating like separation between stimulus and reaction. And that separation allows you to kind of detach and observe your emotions through a lens of like, all right, how am I going to respond? Yes, I'm incredibly frustrated about this. I want to yell. I want to throw things. But what is the best course of action? Probably not that. So let me take a breath, gather my thoughts, and then say, all right, this is the direction we're going to take. And that takes a great deal of practice. When you need to remain calm in stressful situations, that isn't the time to practice, but rather in all circumstances, whether you're happy or excited or maybe sad, like take that moment and create that separation between stimulus and reaction. And now you've started to build a habit where you are acknowledging, experiencing those emotions, but you've developed the habit and the practice to think first and then go about your business in the best possible way. But again, it takes a great deal of practice. The example I gave within the book was that training scenario when we were in Texas. It was a mass cow, so like we were raiding through a village. Again, this is just training, but I want to make that clear. And then I get a call over the radio like, "Hey, we need a medic in this building." I run over there, and it's one guy that's like quote unquote hurt, and then our med officer was like observing us and giving us not critiques, but he's essentially grading us, which adds like another layer of stress amidst the whole situation. But myself and it was a PJ, his name's Andre. We started working on this guy, and then two more injured individuals come through the door, and then like two more, and then like three more. So at the end of the night, we had eight bodies all over the ground, and it's incredibly stressful, and it was fake. Like it wasn't even a real scenario, but it was incredibly stressful. And so if I allowed the stress to then affect my emotions and then I reacted based on the emotions, nobody would have been better off. Like everybody would have suffered. So having the ability to acknowledge emotions, yes, I'm stressed out, but let's get to work. And that comes again through a lot of training. Like my med training was ridiculous. And we practiced trauma scenarios over and over and over again. We had a very specific sequence to address those kind of situations. And so I relied very heavily on, my training and then my confidence in my skills because of the training. And that allowed the stress level to kind of be lowered and then my emotional response to be dampened because I knew what to do. It was just a lot to do. You know what I mean?
What if you don't know what to do? Like, what if all of a sudden, like, you're in this stressful situation and you don't know the steps, but you know you have to remain calm to figure out the steps? And
Sure.
how do you tackle that on?
In a situation like that, I would still take that, 1 second and take a breath, just a big deep breath, and pause. And that doesn't mean freeze up, because if you freeze up, it's almost as bad as if you're reacting poorly based on emotion. I think in any situation, you can at least identify like a micro step you can take in the right direction. And if you can acknowledge that, then just get to that point and and then find the next micro step you can take. And if you can get to that, find the next one. And if you get to the point where you are like, I am capped out, I have no idea what to do. Again, take that breath and try to analyze what the next best step would be. And if you legitimately don't have any clue, you can go back to the beginning. So, for example, for our trauma scenarios, we were given a very specific formula to follow. It's March, so massive hemorrhage, airway, respirations, circulation, hypothermia. And if you're navigating a trauma scenario and you've addressed everything you could in that order, your job is not done. You then just start over and then go back through the formula. Or if you get to a point where it's like he's still crashing, I have no idea what to do, go back to the beginning and run through your sequence. Make sure you didn't miss anything. Make sure that you put that tourniquet on correctly and it's not still leaking. You know what I mean? There's always at least a little something you can do, um, but it requires a pause, a breath, and then thinking through the process.
Today's episode is sponsored by my favorite jewelry company, Omnia. Omnia blends genuine crystals with cutting-edge NFC technology to create the world's first smart crystal bracelet. This bracelet connects to the Elevate web application, giving you a membership to over 200 self-care resources, from meditations to journals to breathing exercises and so much more. Visit discoveromnia.com and use code MindsetPodcast for 40% off. DiscoverOmnia.com, your key to wellness.
What are some controlled environments that we can train ourselves to not react or, be calm?
One of my clients, he and I developed, like, because he wanted to develop that like mental resiliency, that ability to remain calm. And so he created a menu of stressful things he could do throughout the week. And then on Sunday, he'd say, all right, I'm going to do this one, and this one. And those can include cold plunges or cold showers. That's kind of like the new hotness now. But
It's very hot right now.
right. But from a physiological sense, like being in extremely cold water is stressful, and it hijacks your brain because your brain is like, get out right now. And if you can take that pause and that breath and say, no, I'm in charge. We're going to go for another 2 minutes or whatever the case is. Things like that. I really enjoy sauna. So I do like sauna sessions in my garage.
Oh, yes, you mentioned that on the
Yeah.
last episode. Yeah,
And
yeah.
and I do it because it's relaxing at first. But then like the last 15 or 20 minutes is brutal and it becomes like
Can't
a
breathe.
mental,
Oh my
it
God.
becomes like a mental, like, hey, who's going to win, the sauna or me? And it requires like a great deal of focus. And even if I'm trying to distract myself by like reading or scrolling TikTok or something, the
Distractions are hard when you're in pain. Like when you're in
absolutely.
physical pain, like I do my best. I mean, obviously right now I've been going through this month of challenges,
Right. I was going to
and
ask about that.
oh my God. And it's just funny though, because again, I wanted to bring this, especially wanted to circle back with this on your because we didn't really touch base on it, the microwavable society. I mean, we
Yeah.
touched upon it, but I wanted to really dive deeper into it
Yeah.
because I when I was reading that part of the book, it was so prevalent to what I'm going through because I started this warrior roulette challenge, 30 days of hard to
Right.
develop mental toughness and grit, thinking people were going to join in.
Yeah.
Not one person has joined in. And I will tell you why. And I was doing your challenge. This was so funny. So I was doing the one you gave. You gave the one that I did that you gave was you had an exercise, but
Yeah.
and then we ended up, doing a shuttle run and then a run, a 5
Right.
mile run. You
Yeah.
finished, right?
Yeah.
And I'm at the run part, and I was at Planet Fitness because there was all these exercises, and I really wanted to do the outside like run, but I was like, you have to do it in a certain time frame. So I
Right.
was like, I had to treadmill. So my brother calls me in the middle of it, and I answered the phone thinking like, this is fine. I'll bypass the time, a phone call.
Yeah.
And I'm like, hey. And he's like, what are you doing? Because like just the way I answered the phone. And I'm like,
Right.
I'm running. And he's like, why? And I was like, it's part of this, the challenge goes those challenges. He's like, well, I don't even know why I still do them. I go, because I committed to 30 days. He goes, nobody is joining them. And I was like, but it's not about everybody else. It's like
Right.
I committed, and I don't care if other people don't want to get mentally tough. Like it's just something I committed to, and that's it. And he goes, I'll tell you why people don't want to commit. And he goes, because nobody wants to do hard things. And he said, if you did a challenge where you sat on the couch eating a Danish, he goes, everyone will join you. And I was like,
Right.
and he's like, but you would never do that because you would never eat Danish. And I was like, no, I mean, like, that's not part of my identity in terms of physical health,
Right.
So I learned that in terms of being hard, and I find it interesting, like, you as a coach, you have all walks of life and all different people that come to you, and you have those hard chargers, and then you have those that you have to really, I don't want to use the word motivate, but you have to coach in a different way to get
Yeah.
them to because like we mentioned, like doing anything physical is hard, and it's easy to give in to those emotions and to give up to those thoughts because again, our brain's job is to keep us safe. Like you just said, you jump in there in the cold shower and it's like your brain's like, get out, get out, get out. And it's like, no, I control me, right? But
Right.
you get to that level of I control me takes a lot of exercises. And I've learned this because again, I'm going to mention Randy because he's coming onto the show, and he's been coaching me, and he had me do this 40-day exercise of getting up and waking up at the same time every single day, no matter what life throws at you. So it didn't matter if my plane was delayed. It was like,
Right.
you have to restart. He goes, until you get to 40 days, and it took 4 times to get to 40 days. And
Yeah.
on like the last time, and with the last night I was with my mom, and she was not feeling well. And I was like, listen, if something was to happen, call somebody. You can't call me. She goes, but you're with me. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm on the last day. I can't restart.
Right. Yeah.
But like the thing is, like, it's easy to give in to the universe of chaos. We live in chaos. The universe is chaotic. And we're going to talk about this because you have a chapter in your book about how to make it happen. And you mentioned in the podcast, you don't like to leave things up to the universe, and we're going to get into that. I'm all over the place, but I want to get back to the whole microwavable society because because when we were talking just now about being a calm person and all that, well, you have to put yourself through these stressful situations, right? You got to put yourself through the hard times. Like Nick Lavery said, like, if you want to be a Green Beret, this is the cost, right? Like you said, you're not going to be a Green Beret in 90 days. You got to stick through the 3 years.
Right.
So how do you coach your clients, and what, I guess are the most, well, give me an exercise that you think is relevant from your book that people can follow to not give in to the couch, which is so much easier, and to push through the hard to hit the target that they want to hit.
I know we just, talked poorly about motivation. There's a couple different kinds of motivation too. There's like the carrot and the stick. Imagining the future you want and trying to get there. That's like the carrot. You're chasing after that reward. And then the stick would be like, if I change nothing, if I just continue to do what I've been doing, what will my future look like? Is it pre-diabetic? Is it, lost relationships with my loved ones? If you can incorporate a little bit of both or a lot of both, I think that helps a little bit. Again, that motivation is a fickle thing, and if it starts to come into play, then it's icing on the cake. But
by the way, what you mean by that, like, do you mean like also like a reward system, kind of like where it's like you're doing something and then it's like, okay, like you could have you could have a half-hour TV show, get this done, and then get this. Is that what you're talking about too? I'm just trying to.
Yeah. If that will help, I'll give you an example.
I'm just trying to understand the carrot. I want to dive deeper into the carrot. That's where my mind went. I went to a reward program for yourself.
Yeah, and for sure, you can, particularly on like a long journey, giving yourself like small milestones to hit and celebrate is important, because that keeps like the momentum going. I'll give you an example. I think this was in the book too, but I tried to get myself out of bed at like 5 a.m. for months and was unable to do it on my own because the willpower wasn't there. Like I had no reason to. I run my own business. Like I can sleep whenever I want. But I was like, man, I really want this though. And so that's when I called my buddy up. I was like, hey man, tomorrow, if you don't get a text from me proving that I'm awake and up and doing things, I'm gonna give you $100. And he was like, sign me up for that. Yeah, absolutely. And so that was like an example of, the carrot motivation wasn't good enough. Like me enjoying a quiet, peaceful morning, sipping my coffee, relaxed, that wasn't enough to get me out of bed. But the risk of having to pay my friend $100 if I oversleep, that would have been painful. And I actually wound up having to pay him, and he was excited about that. So and it took it like the next morning, I remember like I was able to get up out of bed without even an alarm clock because I was like so paranoid that I was going to oversleep and have to Venmo him. And then it was like months later, like, I don't know, I stayed up too late the night before or something and overslept. But like, yeah, like if you can incorporate those couple portions of motivation, like motivation can be a tool if used appropriately. It's when you start relying completely on motivation that I think you're going to be in trouble. So I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, no, that did, because I think that was really good into the whole. Let's get to one of my favorite chapters is how to make it happen.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, it resonated with me, especially you resonated with me the first time when you mentioned like, I don't really like to leave much up to the universe, and I'll tell you why for myself. Like I used to do the whole like Joe Dispenza, sit down, meditate, visualize what you want forever. Okay. Let me tell you something. Forever never came. It never showed up. Right. And it was just so interesting because I would do it. Like I just have to get up at 3 a.m. and do this meditation exercise. You don't get I don't care what anyone says. The meditation has to be one of the easiest things ever. You just sit there. Okay. That's it. That's all you gotta do. Right. I'll take that over rocking any day. I just sit there. And so I would get up 3 a.m. That's when he says, you should get up and you should do this. And you should be shifting your thoughts into a positive thought of like, I am money comes to me, or, oh, I'm, when I was acting at the time, and seeing myself in those big blockbusters and all that stuff. And then you do it for 5 years and you're like, I'm still in the same spot. Like I haven't moved. Right. And it's just like, well, it's because you haven't taken any action. They forget that part. They leave that part out, because they need the money. And they want you to keep coming back because you do feel good. Shifts do happen. Like, I'm not going to say like they don't, but it's not like a whole like life change. It's like, I find $5 on the street and I'm like, oh my God, this is from me manifesting. Right. And it's like, that's where your mind goes. Right. But in reality, we're not taking the action that we need to be in control and take control. And, like we talked about earlier, when you jump into that cold shower and your brain wants to get out and you're like, no, I'm in control of me, right?
Right.
What we don't talk and we haven't talked about was you have to go through the exercises to get to the point where you control you. You have to get to the point of going through the types of exercises that you need to be in control of your thoughts, your feelings, and your emotions, so you don't react. So you do, so you go to the gym when you want to go to the gym. Now, you do the things you want to do, no matter if you're tired or sad or whatever is going on in your life, right?
Yeah.
That's why they say business doesn't belong in emotions. Well, because your business isn't going to succeed if you're dictating it based off your emotions, just like your life isn't going to do the same thing.
Right.
So I want you to talk about this chapter on how to make it happen and why you need action and why you are in control of you, not the universe in control of you.
Something I'm sure all my clients are tired of hearing it, but I'm like, there's really only two things you can control in this world, and that is your thoughts and your actions. Everything else is kind of not under your control. So that's good and bad news. It's good news because, like, all right, that's not your problem then, it's bad news because like a lot can happen that you have zero control over. But in order to make it happen, I think it's important to have a very clear path and an organized layout of how you're going to achieve what you want to achieve. Like when I was going through the Q course, one of the blocks of instruction, SUT, it was all about planning. We have a mission given to us by a commander, say, hey, I need you to conduct a raid at this point, no later than this time. Well, as soon as we got that, we now have a process. We have to backwards plan all the way up until the moment we're living in right now. Like, what are all of the steps that are required for mission success at that deadline, at that hit time? We can't just wing it. It requires like well thought out and delegation of various people, like working as a whole platoon, a lot of moving pieces, right? As a solo individual, the process is still the same. If my desired end state is XYZ in 5 years or 12 months or 90 days, if that's my desired end state, I need to backwards plan up until today. Like, what do I need to make happen today and then tomorrow and then the day after to stay on track to ensure or to create a greater likelihood of success once that hit time comes. And that's kind of how I laid out the chapter. I talk about the identity. Once that's established, then go through creating goals. And I use the SMART acronym, which is specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time bound. Somebody else way smarter than me came up with that, and I use it because it works. And I think sometimes people struggle with setting goals because they don't get specific enough. Because the brain, when you give it a problem, that's what it starts to solve. So, for example, if you tell me, hey, my financial goal is to be rich, you have told me nothing, and now the brain is trying to solve that problem, but it has no left and right limit to within which to operate. If you then instead told me like, hey, I want to become a real estate investor in 12 months, I want to have, 7 rental properties that are producing X number of dollars per month. I have a property management team set in place, so I don't have to change, unclog toilets or whatever. And you've given me like some specifics. Now the brain is starting to solve that problem, which is very different. And it gives it some like parameters within which to operate. And now it's like, okay, if in 12 months, that's my desired end state, what has to happen these first 6 months? And then this first month, and then this first week. Maybe when you break it all the way down to daily actions, maybe today's action is start calling up or realtor friends and see if they have, multifamily properties or commercial real estate or whatever. And then the next day is like, all right, how do I start acquiring the ability to purchase that with a down payment? Maybe I use a private money lender, and you start making phone calls. But all of that, it still requires like a plan. And so if you know what your desired end state is and can then backwards plan and write out specifically what each of those steps are, there's a greater likelihood of success. And I say that because, as I prefaced all of this with, there's a great deal outside of our control. Life happens sometimes, and it throws a monkey wrench into things that we did not anticipate or hope for. And you have to be able to adjust around that. Sometimes that means that door is closed and you have to change your goal. And sometimes it just means you need to navigate around it.
Jordan Peterson mentions, you could have anything you want in 5 years, as you work
Right.
towards it, but he leaves this one part out that nobody knows. And that's if you abandon everything, because if you abandon everything, well, then you're in control of you, only you, and you're working towards that goal for 5 years. But
Right.
you have a family, you have, all this other stuff that then that influences you and where you're working towards achieving, right? Because
Exactly.
some of those things are out of our control,
Right.
So it's like my dad almost passed away 2 years ago. He had like this giant health scare and was like crazy in the hospital for 14 days. And everything just ceased, right? For those 14 days as we're there, and then I ended up taking on some more stuff to help my family out and things like that. And then there's other things where like, well, that takes time and that takes energy, right? And that's part of my contract within my family. That's like, that I take on because I choose to, because I really love my family and I enjoy being with them. And that's the responsibility I take on from my choice without any anger or resentment or anything like that. I, do it knowing that other things will be pushed aside for the time being. Right. And then that's the thing that it's like, yeah, you can make anything you want to happen without, as long as you get rid of all these external forces that are not in your control. So I really enjoyed, again, that part of the book, because again, it's like, you can only make it so you can make it happen as much as you possibly can. And then you also have to let go of those expectations and let go of control, and just kind of like it. What I like too is it's towards the end of the book, because it brings into effect everything else that we talked about in your book, on like, okay, well, if it doesn't happen, we go back to our identity board of shifting goals, but keeping that identity, right? We don't, we let go of the expectation, and we also don't react, and we stay calm, and we go back to, you mentioned other things on, get awesome at stuff fast, right? Because when you get awesome at stuff fast, you can then shift to something else quicker, and keep the momentum, and also keep, you don't have to always go back to the bottom, you don't have to be the assistant or the secretary or, the work, like down at the bottom. No, I got these skill sets that I've been developing. And like you mentioned in the book, I think you mentioned like, it's to be said, okay, it's to be said that, you read 3 books on a subject and, suddenly you're an expert, 95%, you're higher than 95% of the people. Now, obviously, but you mentioned this, which I think is important, that we get to the last chapter, you got to take action, make it happen, right? You got to just like do. And it's like, well, how do you get awesome at stuff fast? Well, you do it, you fail, you learn, right? You want to, have a coaching business. So, you have to get clients. And I know when I started, I was a life coach for a little bit, believe it or not. And when barely had my own life together. And when I was doing it though, like I had like 10 free clients just to get a plan together, to understand, like to get feedback. That's what they were. They came in to, get the feedback and all that other stuff. Then I was able to be like, okay, now I got the game plan to go further and further and further. But I failed so many times, and I learned, I don't even think they're really, they're all lessons, failure is just, again, that's such a broad aspect. But I loved your book in a point. Well, first of all, I want to thank you so much for being here, but I think your book's so important for everybody who just wants to, even if you want to, you mentioned this in the book, you have an exercise for this, I remember, on like just improving your life, just 1%, just taking 1%. And you had an exercise in there that I really enjoyed, because the thing is, I read the book, but I didn't do everything yet, because I also think you need to take the time to spend on each chapter, and reread and develop and do the exercise, and then assess the exercise. Okay. Like, how did this exercise impact me? How is it helping? Do I need to redo the exercise again for myself? It's not like a one and done thing. It's like, it's something that you always, it's a good baseline for you to always go back to. And it's a unique book because many books don't have, like, you also have like suggestive reading books, and you have QR codes for extra information and all this other stuff that books don't, not all books give you. And for you, it's like you give, it's so well-rounded where like you want everybody to, hit that untapped potential and be the person that they want to be, and all the stuff that, is what this podcast has built upon. So thanks for being here and for sharing the book and everything. Because how long did it take you, by the way, to write the book?
It felt like a long time. I was fortunate enough that I brought on like a publishing company that kind of kept me to a deadline. And they claim that they can get you from 0 to published book in 90 days. And I was like, that sounds great. It took me 6 months primarily because when I would get, the manuscript back, I would go back in and like add things or take things away or rearrange things. And part of that is kind of my own neuroses, like wanting things to be perfect. And I at some point, I just had to kind of let go and say, good and done is better than perfect and never done. And I had to like just acknowledge, like, maybe it's not perfect, but I think it still has value and can help people. So it was about 6 months.
Super valuable. It's super valuable. And I worked for Ralph Macchio, and I remember he said to me one time, he said, projects are never done, they're just abandoned. And he goes, and he said, at some point you just let it go, and that's it. And then you just don't go back to it. It's because it's out there. The book is out there, people forget the marketing part. That's the part that never ends. But now, thank you so much. Is there anything that you think we missed that you wanted to touch upon at all, or?
No, you covered like most of the book, which I'm thoroughly impressed with. So thank you so much. No, this has been an awesome opportunity. I love having conversations with you. I hope to do it again soon.
Yeah, definitely. And for anyone that's listening and you made it this far, you got to get the book at this point. It's really fantastic. I think you guys are going to love the exercises, and let us know, share it in your Instagram stories, share it online, tag Chris and let him know what you guys think of the book and how it's impacting you, because it's definitely impacting me. So thank you, everyone. And don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe to become a Patreon member. Keep the podcast going. And I'll see you guys next week. Thank you so much.